Sometime in 1988, at a test range called Kapustin Yar, deep inside the Soviet Union, a team of engineers took the most powerful weapon their country had ever built, packed it with the better part of a ton of high explosives, and then blew it to pieces. And then they did it again and again until every last one was gone. These weren't broken missiles or obsolete ones. The RSD-10, known in the West as the SS-20 Sabre, was little more than a decade old and was, by almost any measure, the finest weapon in the Soviet arsenal. So why on earth would the Soviet Union agree to destroy it? Not a handful as a gesture, but the entire force, all 654 of them, destroyed one by one under the watchful eyes of American inspectors. Nations don't normally give up their best card, and certainly they don't blow them up. The answer to this wasn't in Moscow at all. It was sitting in a field in West Germany. A single American missile, smaller than the ones the Soviets were busy blowing up, that they had decided they simply could not live with. This is the story of the Pershing II, a weapon that came to terrify a superpower into scrapping its finest, and how the technology hidden inside it never really died at all. It begins on the 31st of October 1956 when the U.S. Army requested a feasibility study for a new ballistic missile. Now, to understand that request, you have to understand how frustrated the Army was. Just months earlier, Secretary of Defense Charles Wilson had stripped it of any missile with a range of over 200 miles or 320 kilometers and handed the long-range business to the Air Force. Yet here was the Army asking to study for a ballistic missile with a range of 500 to 750 nautical miles, roughly 900 to 1400 kilometers, at exactly the moment it had been told it couldn't build one. The request went to the Army Ballistic Missile Agency at Redstone Arsenal, where Wernher von Braun's team got to work, and by 1957 they had shown that it was feasible. Conveniently, that same year, the range restriction was quietly cancelled. In January of 1958, the weapon was named Pershing, after General John J. Blackjack Pershing of First World War fame, and that March the whole development contract went to Martin Company of Orlando, later Martin Marietta. That was also a first itself, because up until then the Army had always built its own missiles in-house. So what were they building? They were making a replacement for the ageing Redstone, and the first, and as it turned out, only solid-fueled medium-range ballistic missile the US Army ever deployed. The Redstone ran on liquid propellant, which had to be pumped in on the pad before firing, a slow, dangerous, visible business that used highly volatile fuels. A solid propellant could sit inside a missile for years, ready to go at any time, safer, easier to handle, and above all, it meant the missile could be kept on permanent alert and fired at very short notice. The first Pershing I flew on the 25th of February 1960, and by 1962 the first battalion was active. It was a two-stage rocket about 34.6 feet or 10.5 metres long, guided by an all-inertial system and fired from a tracked launcher, and that launcher introduced the idea the family became famous for, shoot and scoot. Rather than sit in a fixed silo waiting to be found, it drove out, it put its missile up, fired and was gone before anyone could hit back. The range was around 460 miles or 740 kilometres, double that of the Redstones, and it carried a W-50 warhead with yields of up to 400 kilotons. But there was a catch, and that was the Pershing I's accuracy. Its circular error probable, or CEP, was around 400 metres or 1,310 feet. CEP is just the radius of a circle around the target inside which half of your missiles are expected to land. So half of them would miss by more than 400 metres. The culprit was the inertial guidance system, which worked by measuring every acceleration and adding it up to track its position. But tiny errors accumulate over distance, so the further you fly, the more it drifts. Inertial guidance systems today are now far more accurate, but back in the early 60s that wasn't an option. And with the inertial guidance only, there was no looking down to check. So to be sure of killing a hardened target with a missile that inaccurate, you needed a very large warhead and brute force. Through the late 1960s, Pershing 1A was introduced and improved the system. a faster wheeled launcher suited to German roads, solid-state electronics replaced valves, and the ability to fire several missiles in quick succession. By 1970 it had replaced the original almost entirely and was fielded by both the US Army and the West German Luftwaffe. For most of the 1970s, this was NATO's frontline nuclear missile in Europe, and it seemed perfectly adequate. And then the Soviets threw a rather large spanner into the works. That spanner was the RSD-10, the SS-20 Sabre, the very missile we watched being torn apart at Kapustin Yar in the opening. In the mid-1970s, the Soviet Union began rolling it out. It was a serious problem. It was mobile, like the Pershing, but far more capable. It had 3 independently targetable warheads on one missile, with a range to hit targets right across Western Europe from deep within the Soviet Union. Suddenly, Moscow could threaten every European capital with a modern, accurate weapon, whilst NATO's Pershing IA couldn't even reach Soviet soil. The balance of power had strategically shifted in favour of the Soviets. The Pershing story is really a story about precision, finding a target, tracking it, and then acting before the other side can respond. Today, companies are doing something far less dramatic, but much more personal, building remarkably precise profiles of you. Over the last couple of years, I've noticed that I'm constantly getting added to email lists I've never subscribed to, and bombarded with offers that sort of feel like they know you. Well, that's data brokers at work selling your details to anyone that will pay. Data brokers collect details such as your name, address, phone number, email, employment history, interests, and even information from health apps, then package it up and sell it. But if you work in sensitive areas like government, security, military, or you have a high profile, then having your data for sale to anyone can be a security risk to you and your family. Now, you can remove it yourself, but good luck trying to find it amongst the hundreds of brokers and requesting removal one at a time. That is what Incogni is designed to handle. You create an account, provide only the information needed to locate your profiles, and authorize Incogni to contact data brokers on your behalf. It then sends removal requests to hundreds of brokers, follows up with them, and then continues checking because information that has been deleted can reappear later. The unlimited plan also includes a custom removal section. So if you discover your personal information is exposed on another eligible website, simply send Incogni the link and a dedicated privacy expert will work to remove it. Incogni's data removal process has been independently verified by Deloitte, and every plan comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So take back control of your personal data today and use the code DROID through the link in the description below to receive 60% off of the annual Incogni plan, because they can't harm you if they can't find you. On the 12th of December 1979, NATO made one of the more elegant and also controversial decisions of the Cold War, the double-track decision. It ran 2 tracks at once. Track 1 offered the Soviets immediate talks to remove the SS-20s. Track 2 committed NATO, if those talks failed, by late 1983 to deploy 108 Pershing II launchers and 464 ground-launched cruise missiles into Western Europe. It was a 4-year ultimatum. Negotiate these things away or we'll bring in something you'll like even less. So what was so special about the Pershing II? On the surface it looked much like its predecessor, a 2-stage solid fuel missile about the same length fired from a wheeled launcher. New Hercules motors, their casing spun from lightweight Kevlar, pushed the range out to around 1,100 miles or 1,770 kilometers, enough for the first time to reach into the Western Soviet Union. But the range wasn't the clever part. That was hidden in the nose cone. Remember that inertial guidance drifts, so accuracy gets worse with distance, and that 400-meter CEP demanded an enormous warhead. The Pershing II solved that problem with a technology called RADAG, Radar Area Guidance, on a maneuverable re-entry vehicle. It flew most of its path on inertial guidance as before, but as the warhead re-entered the atmosphere, a small radar in the nose cone switched on, scanned the ground, and compared what it saw to a stored radar map of the target. Any difference told it how far off course it was, and it steered itself using the aerodynamic fins. Because that correction came right at the end of a ballistic flight over the target, it cancelled out all of the drift built up on the way down. The result was a CEP of around just 30 metres or 100 feet, and crucially one that no longer got worse with range. It didn't matter if the target was 100 miles away, 160 kilometres, or 2,000 miles away, 3,200 kilometres. It would still have a CEP of around 30 metres. Now think of what 30 metres buys you. Land that close and you can destroy a hardened, buried command bunker with a much smaller weapon. That's why the Pershing II could carry the compact W85 warhead with a dialer yield of just 5 to 80 kilotons, a fraction of the old 400 kiloton one, and still be more lethal against protected targets than its predecessor was. And this is where you have to understand why the Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev blinked. Put it together. A missile in West Germany able to reach the Western Soviet Union and able to land within 30 metres and therefore destroy the hardened command centres from which the Soviet leadership would run a nuclear war. Then add in the last most frightening ingredient for them, time. From Germany, a Pershing II could reach those targets in roughly 8 to 10 minutes against the 25 to 30 minutes for an intercontinental ballistic missile from the United States. To the Soviet planners, that looked less like a battlefield weapon and more like a first strike decapitation weapon, one that would kill their leadership so fast and precisely that they might never order a response. Whether that was ever the intention hardly mattered. What mattered was that Moscow believed it. The first test flight came on the 22nd of July 1982, and when the talks stalled, deployment went ahead. The first missiles reached the 56th Field Artillery Brigade in West Germany in December 1983, and eventually all 108 launchers were in place. The Soviets walked out of the arms talks almost at once, as expected, and across Europe, hundreds of thousands marched against its deployment. For a while, the gamble looked like it might tear NATO apart from the inside. After the deadlock and after Gorbachev arrived with a genuine appetite for cutting the nuclear burden, both sides came to the table, and this time they didn't just cap weapons, they abolished them. The INF Treaty of the 8th of December 1987 eliminated every American and Soviet ground-launched missile with a range of between 500 and 5,500 kilometres. Out went the SS-20s, the SS-4s, SS-5s on one side, and the Pershing IIs, the older Pershing 1As, and the cruise missiles on the other. Roughly 2,700 Soviet missiles and around 800 American ones. The Pershings were mostly static-fired, bolted down and burned out where they lay, and their casings crushed. A weapon that took over a decade to build was gone within a few years, without ever being fired in anger. However, that's not the end of the story. Destroying the missiles did not destroy the technology, it just scattered it. The treaty covered the missiles and launchers, not the warheads, so the W-85s were pulled out and rebuilt into B-61 gravity bombs still carried by American aircraft today. It didn't cover the guidance sections either, so those radar-guided nose cones were bolted onto missile defense target rockets, like the Hera, and fired so that new interceptors such as THAAD could practice shooting down something exactly like them. The very hardware built to defeat Soviet defences ended up as a training rocket to teach American ones. The bigger legacy was the idea. No one shipped a Pershing part abroad, but the concept it proved, a manoeuvring warhead with its own terminal seeker, is exactly what appeared in the anti-ship ballistic missile, the carrier killer. China's DF-21D and DF-26 use the same trick, only now the target is a moving aircraft carrier rather than a bunker on a map. And the deployment idea outlived everything. The Pershing II's self-locating launcher meant that it could pull up almost anywhere and fire in minutes. And that is now how all mobile ballistic missiles work today. More recently, when the US walked away from the INF Treaty in 2019 and the banned class started to creep back in, the systems the Army rolled out to replace it, the Road Mobile Typhon and the trailer-launched Dark Eagle hypersonic, are direct descendants of the Pershing II missile that the treaty destroyed. So, do you think the Pershing II really forced the Soviets' hands, or were bigger forces already pulling both sides towards that treaty? And now, as the whole banned class is quietly returning, are we simply watching the same old story play out all over again? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, then please thumbs up, share and subscribe, and a big thanks go to all of our patrons for their ongoing support.